Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Ink, Red, Dead by Joanna Campbell Slan. Narrated by Amy Mcfadden. 1. Mid-August, Ladue, Missouri. Early Thursday morning. The minute we pulled into the driveway, I told Clancy this was a bad idea. A very, very bad idea. I had this yucky feeling. Be sure to put that in the report. I pointed at the pad where Detective Stan Hodcho of the St. Louis Police Department took notes. His pen moved across the pad. A slight breeze lifted a strand of his jet black hair. Instinctively, I leaned forward to see if I could catch a little of the fresh air. But it was no use. The atmosphere was thick with nasty smells. Even the walnut table where we had gathered around had its own funky stink. I could hear myself wheezing as my lungs struggled to cope.
"That's so. You thought it was a bad idea. And you are?"
His voice was muffled by the tissues he'd stuffed up his nose. "I'm Kiki Lowenstein. This is my friend, Clancy Whitehead. We work together at Time in a Bottle. That's a scrapbook store south of 40, right off of Brentwood Boulevard. When we got here, I had a bad feeling." A dribble of sweat ran down the cop's temple. The backs of his hands gleamed with perspiration. A ring of wet spread out from his neck along his collar. But he didn't loosen his tie. That's self-discipline for you. Even in the blazing heat of a mid-August day in Missouri, this man managed to look like a natty dresser. Clancy huddled in her chair, trying not to touch any of the gross surfaces that surrounded us. I met Clancy shortly after she and her husband split up. Back then, a full day for her was alphabetizing her spice rack. She hated her life. When I suggested that she help us out at Time in a Bottle, Clancy jumped at the chance. Since then, she's proved to be an invaluable part-time employee who's always willing to come in at the last minute and work. Although she's not much of a crafter, she's learning. She's highly organized, a trait that's not part of my DNA. If I'm being totally honest, I'm glad to have Clancy around because my boss, Dodie, also hired another part-timer, Bama Vess. To say that Bama and I don't get along would be to put a nice spin on our relationship. I don't like her, and she doesn't like me. I think I have good reason. Bama acts like she's hot stuff, and she's always taking off work time. For example, she couldn't come to the crop at Marla's house. Bama said she was busy. Busy my big butt. Bama doesn't like leaving the store.
"You had a bad feeling,"
Hodcho repeated, more to himself than to us. "Right. I'm a card-carrying Episcopalian, high church, but I respect the power of intuition. We should have turned around and gone home. Back to the store." Clancy was trembling so hard that her chair was clacking against the table. She fluffed her hair and reapplied her bright red Chanel lipstick. It was a reflexive action, her attempt at regaining control. Unfortunately, her hand shook like a tree in a tornado, and as a result, she definitely had colored out of the lines. It might have been comical under other circumstances. Not today.
"Your business is actually in Richmond Heights, not St. Louis proper, and the two of you are here, why?"
Hodcho kept writing. "Because we were supposed to hold a scrapbook party here. We call them crops," I said.
"Really?"
Hodcho raised his eyebrows and scanned the stacks of newspapers that were stacked high, forming tattered gray walls around us. Although we were sitting in a dining room, the only indication of its intended use was a round wooden table with 4 chairs. We occupied 3 of the seats. A big calico cat calmly washed her paws as she sat on the 4th seat.
"Why would you hold an event here?" the cop wondered. "Doesn't seem like the sort of image anyone would want to project to their customers."
He was right. This place was a total dump, a disaster, a mess. Actually, there weren't enough negative adjectives in my vocabulary to cover it. Clancy and I work for Dodie Goldfodder, the owner of Time in a Bottle. Her store is considered by many to be the premier scrapbook store in the Midwest. Dodie has high standards, sometimes impossibly so. But to make a long story short, Dodie had decreed we'd do off-site events. So Clancy and I were here at Marla Lever's house to put on a scrapbook party while Marla played hostess. That was the plan. The reality was different. One look at the unkempt state of the place told us something was seriously amiss. On closer inspection, well, my spidey senses went on full alert. I opened my phone and dialed 911. Hodjo had been a few blocks away in his police cruiser.
"Detective, I'll stand outside and tell people the scrapbook event has been called off. That okay?"
Drat! Clancy paused midway in returning her Chanel lipstick to her purse. She held up the white bag for our inspection.
"Just look at this ink stain, soaked right through the leather. The pen I was carrying must have come uncapped. Shoot, and I really liked this purse."
The pen had also jabbed through the leather and doodled on her nice white slacks. I decided not to tell her because there was nothing she could do about it, and I figured that she was shook up enough. Why make things worse? But every step she took caused her purse to swing forward and back like a pendulum, and another navy blue ink smear decorated the hip of her white slacks.
"No dry cleaner on earth will ever get that out,"
Hodjo said.
"Those are linen. Nice stuff."
The man knew his fabrics. I waited until Clancy had walked away before telling Hodjo. I wanted to turn around and go home. I really did. I knew something was wrong. Was I ever right about wrong?
"Next time that happens, pay attention,"
said Hodjo, pointing a pen at me.
"Because your instincts were right, and now you've stepped in a mess."
You mean because Marla is a hoarder?
No, because you have poop on your shoes.
Hodjo glanced down at my keds.
"How about if you clean those off? We're going to be here a while."
2.
"Start at the beginning,"
Hodjo said.
"Had you ever been here?"
"Nope," we answered in chorus.
"What did you see when you first arrived?"
"We saw this garbage dump," said Clancy. "We double-checked the address, and then we tried to track down the woman we were here to meet. Marla," I added. "Marla Lever." With that, I took over telling the story. "I wonder if her car's here," I had said to Clancy as we trooped through the grass. We'd already tried knocking at the front door and calling. Now we waited toward the detached garage, waving away the smoke signals of bugs that flew up in our wake. Cupping our hands around our eyes, we pressed our faces to the dirty window. We could barely make out Marla Lever's car. Old furniture, lawn chairs, tools, and gadgets were stuffed around a shiny gold Impala with a cream-colored leather roof. A dank smell oozed from the building.
"What do you think?"
Clancy turned to me. "She has to be here. Her car is.
Unless someone gave her a ride somewhere."
"Who would do that?" asked Clancy. We both knew that Marla was a loner. I'd never seen her come into our store with friends. Nor had I seen her leave with buddies. In fact, I'd never heard her talk about people at all.
"You don't think she got confused, do you? Maybe she thought the scrapbook event was going to be held at the store?"
"When did you last talk?" "Yesterday. I said we'd be here early. She seemed a little nervous."
"No kidding. Wonder why?"
Clancy usually isn't sarcastic, but she had agreed with me that moving scrapbook events from one customer's house to the next was a bad idea. She was going to try to get someone to come mow her grass. That someone gave up, obviously. I scratched at a spot behind my knee. Tick bite, I just knew it. A trickle of perspiration ran down my face.
"You figure she bailed on us? Maybe when she couldn't get the grass cut?"
"I have no idea." Crickets sang lustily in the grass, falling silent as we walked nearer. "Call her again." I opened my cell phone, redialed Marla's number, and listened. This time we heard ringing in the house. "Up to you." Clancy faked a tap dance, waved her arms, and sang, "Shall we stay or shall we go? Da-da-da-ta, da-da-ta." That Clancy. What a card. I shook an ant off my sleeve and weighed our options. We could go back to the store. That meant facing Rebecca the Terrible, Dodie's daughter, our new sales mangler. Yes, that's what her business card said. I didn't bother to point out the typo. Or we could sit in Clancy's car, crank up the AC, and wait, hoping Marla would show up. Maybe she was out running errands and got behind? Errands on foot? In this heat? I was dreaming, wasn't I? Or we could leave. That nagging voice in my head suggested we hightail it. But we couldn't leave. 12 people had RSVP'd, promising to join us here in 45 minutes for a crop. We would have to try to head those scrappers off. At the very least, we needed to post a message on the front door. Clancy noticed the pained expression on my face. "The scrapbookers aren't going to like this," I said. "We could stand at Marla's door and pretend to be knocking when the others drive up," she said, in a voice that was oh so casual. "This whole fiasco would look like a surprise to us, which it is." "We could both look pitiful," I added. I had practice at that. I do pitiful pretty well. That way maybe they'd blame Marla, not us. Sounds petty, but I did not want to get blamed for canceling this crop. I know from experience that scrapbookers do not take kindly to such disappointments. Loading up all their gear is a lot of work. Excitement runs high at scrapbooking events. Tempers naturally follow at a fevered pitch. Furthermore, we'd had to turn down customers who wanted to come once they heard I was teaching a class on how to incorporate newspapers as a journaling device on their scrapbook and journal pages. In fact, we'd titled the crop, "What's Black and White and Red All Over Your Pages?" Since it was summer in St. Louis and the cards were winning, everyone wanted to incorporate their exploits into their scrapbook albums. My nifty idea did just that. Now all my supplies were sitting in the trunk of Clancy's car, and the crop looked like it was a non-starter. Drat! That was all I could muster. I'd lobbied long and loud against this traveling dog and pony show. I'm a control freak. I liked having events in the store because I could predict the environment. When you go to someone's home, you never know if they'll have a proper workspace, good lighting, and so on. Or if they'll have a rambunctious dog, or an ailing live-in relative, or a backed-up toilet. Could happen. It had happened. Louise Hudson had a dachshund who couldn't stop piddling with joy at our arrival. Ekla Gitano's father-in-law insisted on sitting with us to watch what we were doing, and managed to fart at regular intervals. But the worst mess had been Kathy Zantini's toilet. It overflowed, sending a tsunami of sewage into the family room where we were crafting. All those nightmares had come to pass, but not a no-show. Not yet, but I knew it might. We were bound to wind up at someone's house and discover she had the wrong date on her calendar. I warned Dodie of impending doom, while her daughter Rebecca glowered at me. Don't get me wrong, I love Rebecca, but she's totally unsuited for the job of being our store manager. She's not detail-oriented, she's not mature enough to manage people, and she's not willing to listen. Furthermore, her new title totally went to her head. Rather than hearing me out, Rebecca dug in her heels, whatever that means. The off-site events were her idea, and she was not about to listen to reason. Of course, Bama sided with Rebecca. That woman is such a brown-noser that she had the nerve to say, "I think going to people's houses is a wonderful idea. Very ingenious." That was rich, considering how she always managed to get out of being the person who handled the off-site, at-home crops. I wasn't about to give in easily, even if Bama's comment did make me look like a chump. I don't think this is a good idea. We have customers with megabucks and customers who shoot bucks for food. There's too much of an economic disparity in our clientele to pull this off. Someone is bound to feel bad, or feel slighted, get embarrassed.
Thanks for the warning, sunshine.
Dodie gave me a smile that wasn't a smile. Not really.
I think Rebecca came up with a good idea. I'm supporting her with it. In the immortal words of Jean-Luc Picard, make it so.
To that, Rebecca added a self-satisfied smirk. Not her best look. Bama gave Dodie a high five. I tried not to sulk. Boy, was I eager to get back to the store and tell them how this super idea had backfired. 3. With less than an hour to go before the crop started, Clancy and I were starting to get desperate. And wilted. Our clothing was damp with stinky sweat. Maybe Marla's in the bathroom. Clancy sounded optimistic. That happens when people get nervous. Right, a bathroom in Bolivia. I bet she left the country. Kiki Lowenstein, you are such a goof. No, I'm being honest. You know and I know Marla didn't want to host this. I could tell she wanted out of this, but Rebecca... Yes, exactly. But Rebecca. We've been saying that a lot lately, haven't we? Rebecca refused to take no for an answer. Marla tried to get out of it, but Rebecca pushed her. So how could Marla save face? She could run away. Sounded reasonable to me. I wanted to run away, right now. Without her car? She could run far away, very, very far away. A dreamy series of tropical scenes danced through my head. You don't need your car if you cross the ocean. Do you know that if you MapQuest directions from Los Angeles to Honolulu, it says, kayak across Pacific Ocean, 2,756 miles? If you go from Japan to China on MapQuest, the directions say, jet ski across the Pacific Ocean, 762 kilometers. Clancy stared at me from under her thick black lashes. Kiki Lowenstein, you have entirely too much time on your hands. No, really, it's all true. Maybe she decided to try it. What you think, jet ski or kayak? Could we just leave, put a note on the door, and try to contact the others? Sounds good to me. Clancy, clearly wilting, reached inside her leather handbag. As she hauled out her keys, we looked at each other in silence, both of us feeling guilty. That's when it hit me. Wait a minute. Do you hear anything? Other than the happy hum of mosquitoes as they make withdrawals from my blood bank? No, I don't hear a thing. Why? I turned in a small circle, listening carefully. There was no noise, not a whirl, or a humming, or a clank. The air conditioner was suspiciously quiet. Given the heat, that didn't make sense. What? Clancy jingled the keys at me. Can we go? There's no noise. How come the air conditioning isn't going, huh? What if she's here, inside? What if her AC went out and she's sick? Or worse? The news, Clancy whispered and turned pale. Every broadcast of the evening news brought more and more reports of elderly people found dead at home. The culprit? The soaring temps. A nasty heat wave had wrestled the Midwest to the mat. The city and the county of St. Louis both were ready to cry uncle. Cooling shelters were filled to capacity. Neighbors had been asked to check on each other. Hazardous situations were to be reported to authorities. I had sighed then, giving up a gust of capitulation. Come on! We can't leave until we know she's okay. Let's try the front door again. After that, we call the cops. That's when I jiggled the handle harder and put my shoulder against it. To my shock, the door opened slightly. A fetid stink oozed out at me. The smell nearly bowled me over. It was sickly sweet, rotten, and pervasive, with an undertone of ammonia. I turned my head, gasping for air, and gagged. Oh! Clancy had put her hand over her mouth and coughed.
"What is that smell? Cat pee?"
A dozen kitty faces filled the open space between door and door jamb. "I think so." Using the tip of my keds to keep the cats from getting caught in the door, I had eased it shut. I didn't slam it, but I did close it enough that none of the kitties could race outside. The cats protested with loud meows, but there were no yelps of pain.
"Marla has to be in there. Why else would the door be unlocked?"
Clancy said.
"And if she's there, she's in trouble."
"I'm going in, but I'll need to move fast." I had gulped fresh air. I used my toe to nudge the cats back inside, hopped over the top of them, as a crowd had now gathered, and I slowly closed the door behind me. My eyes watered like garden hoses. I found it hard to take a breath, but I was on a mission, so I stepped further into the house, even though I couldn't see anything. "Marla? Marla, it's Kiki. Remember, Clancy and I came early to help you get ready for the crop? Yoo-hoo! Anybody home?" The room had started moving, coming toward me, a carpet of living cats, big and small, striped, yellow, black, white, Siamese, long-haired, short-haired, and practically no-haired. Whoa! I backed up against the entrance as they crawled toward me, wave after wave of feline faces. I scanned the room. I felt disoriented, dizzy even, standing in a narrow tunnel formed by towering piles of newspapers. The room closed in on me. The heat in the house and the ammonia from the cat pee caused me to feel lightheaded. My chest walls tightened, a prelude to an asthma attack. Between the smell and the heat, I couldn't function. At least, not very well. "Marla? Marla!" And the cats kept coming. 4. Meowing and mewing and hissing, they pawed my legs. I plucked them off gently, and as soon as I untangled one, 2 more took its place. They reared back on their haunches and patted the air, trying to get my attention. They jumped over each other to get to me. They ran under each other. They rolled like tumbleweeds you saw in westerns. "Marla? Hello?" I thought I heard a noise, a human groan. Or was it a cat? I walked toward the sound, following a path of urine-soaked newspapers and nasty carpet samples. I tried not to step on paws or tails, but I didn't dare touch the makeshift walls of newspaper for balance, out of fear they would come down on me. 12 feet in, the tunnel widened into an open space where a sagging sofa faced a quiet TV. The cats hopped down from the top of the old-fashioned television console to greet me, yowling at my feet and rubbing against my legs. In the heart of the house, the heat became even more oppressive. I pulled up my shirt and held it over my face, even though my tummy was exposed. I did my best to breathe through the fabric. "Marla?" I paused to listen. Then I saw it. Marla's purse. The keys dangled half in and half out. She wouldn't have left without it. Couldn't have. "Marla? Marla!" I stumbled over furry bodies, moving as fast as I could, keeping on the narrow pathway. I wandered through a rabbit warren of flattened and stacked cardboard boxes. I found myself surrounded by tall metal shelves, each crammed with stuff. Cans, broken toys, clothing, broken appliances, and old paperback books. The smell of must and mold intensified the stink of cat pee. I gagged, but kept moving. "Marla? Marla, are you in here?" I couldn't tell if I heard a noise or not. The cat's cries crescendoed to a loud cacophony of complaints. A crowd of cats, lean and hungry, kept pace with me. There were so many, I couldn't count them. I came upon a once beautiful round oak pedestal table, marred by the scratch marks of dozens of claws. On the tabletop sat a dirty pet bed. 3 cats slept there, except that not all of them were sleeping. One was dead. I had swallowed hard, tried not to heave, and retraced my steps. "Marla!" I had yelled at the top of my voice. I couldn't take much more of this. A moan beckoned me deeper into the dark house, a place where junk blocked all the light from the windows and fixtures. "Marla!" I yelled again, coughing some as the fumes snatched the air from my lungs. The tightness in my chest cut off my wind, like a band tightening across my ribs. The noise came from the back of the house. It was human, and it was in distress. 5. The noise beckoned me, even though I didn't want to go farther inside. Following the faint moans and instinct, I picked my way to what I assumed was a bedroom door. Summoning all my willpower, I pushed it open, only to spot a pair of legs hanging off the end of a bed. "Marla?" If she had not whimpered, I wouldn't have known she was alive. Pushing cats out of the way, I ran to her and switched on a bedside lamp. Her skin felt clammy to my touch. I could see her heartbeat through the thin skin in her temple. She didn't appear to be bleeding. I was afraid to encourage her to sit up, in case that might do her more harm than good. There was half a glass of water on a low dresser nearby. I dipped my fingers into it and applied it to her lips. She responded by licking the water off her mouth. I repeated the action until I'd gotten a quarter of the glass down her. "Hang on, I'll get help." I raced out the way I'd come, hopping over cats as best I could. I threw the front door open so wide that it bumped Clancy on the backside. "Oh," she moaned as she wiped her mouth. A sour smell in the air told me she'd been sick. "Marla's in there." "She okay?" Clancy burped quietly. "Excuse me." "I'm calling in the cavalry." I fished in my purse for my phone. I also needed my inhaler. I could hear myself wheezing. "That's cavalry, not Calvary." Clancy bent over the railing and heaved. I dialed 911. "My friend and I are okay, but we've got a situation here." I told the dispatcher our names, our address, and that we needed an ambulance immediately. The dispatcher asked me several questions about Marla's condition, and then, "Are you with the woman right now?" "I'm not." And in disjointed sentences, I explained how many cats there were in the house. "There are also stacks and stacks of newspapers, so it's like walking through a tunnel. A really, really narrow tunnel that might fall down at any time." "We don't want you to endanger yourself," said the calm and collected voice on the other end. "Stay where you are. I have a detective in the area who's on his way. I'll also alert animal control." "Good idea." "Mrs. Lowenstein, is that you wheezing? If you are having trouble breathing, you need to get yourself into some place where there's air conditioning." "I can't go sit in the car, not when Marla's in such bad shape." Of course, that's what I tried to say. The truth is my asthma now rendered talking nearly impossible. I wheezed like a bad church organ. I raised a quizzical eyebrow at Clancy. "Can you go see about her?" "Are you kidding?" My friend shook her head. "I can barely stand up. It's not smart for either of us to go inside. Remember those brothers who died in New York, buried under all the junk they'd collected? With so many papers piled up, they could fall down on you. Us? That wouldn't do Marla any good, would it?" 6. I agreed and searched in earnest for my inhaler. I found it at the bottom of my purse. I took one puff and watched Clancy get the dry heaves. When they stopped, she picked her way down the front steps to lean against the front of Marla's house. I took a second puff from my inhaler. I was exhaling slowly when a police cruiser came around the corner on 2 wheels. "Detective Stan Hodjo," the driver said as he flipped open his jacket to display a badge. He followed that by handing us both his card. "What's up?"
There's a woman inside in distress. She's alive, but...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?